yesterday. It was a beautiful day to be walking around our city. So we're going to start today with a panel, then move on to camp sessions. Elizabeth will announce the camp sessions at the end of the session. To now, we have one camp session, we come back. There's the last showcase, and then we have just a quick reflective closing session over box lunches today, and then folks can hang around for lunch as long or as short as they need to or want to at that point. So a couple of things, if people who have t-shirts can put them on and I guess come up here during the break for our traditional t-shirt exchange photo. That would be great. And the is there any other logistics? What? The box lunches. Oh yeah, lunches will be put out around 10:45. For those of you who need to zoom out, you can grab the lunch and go away. And we often we can put up the Flipboard if there's people who want to travel or are traveling to the airport together. It's an easy metro trip, or sometimes there's cabs out front, or I often get a lift from the Spy Museum because people can't find this building. So, so those are all ways to get, Elizabeth is nodding vehemently on that side. So I'm super excited about this panel this morning that came together, both that we can hear from some work that we've been hearing from Philadelphia for a long time, sort of like mentioned in webinars in passing that we haven't been able to dig into and really hear about. Also from the Promise Neighborhoods, which has Urban is the TA provider for the Promise Neighborhoods too, so there's some Promise staff here. So it's both topic and the method sound super interesting, and having the community researchers that you hear from, it makes it a really special occasion. And then also to bring in the other piece we do is to bring in new voices and great ideas from elsewhere, and our folks from Tucson from the Catalyst Grant Program. The RFP is open until right now. If you'd like more information, it's due December 2nd, so there's lots of time to put partnerships and ideas together still for that program, and Pablo, Elizabeth, and I would be happy to talk with them. The Just Communities was part of our pilot, our first 9 grantees that really helped us try out the program and check out the design before we did our second round of amazing 30 grantees. I sent it around, many of you have grantees in your communities that you may or may not know. I know Bob talked about connecting with them. So I encourage you to check out those great profiles. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Amy to moderate the session.
Thank you, Kathy, and good morning, everyone. I'm really excited to moderate this session. We wanted to put together something that really speaks to our mission as a network, putting data into the hands of those who can create positive change in the communities most affected by systemic racism and disinvestment, so that they have the tools for planning, for advocacy, and for evaluating what works and what doesn't work in their communities. So, I think a lot of us do this informational listening and reflect the data that we seek and that we visualize and that we democratize access to our communities. And some of us also collect primary data in partnership with those voices. But the 2 examples today are going to talk about real community engagement, real participatory and authentic engagement in the process of shaping the data that's collected in order to really maximize its benefits for how it's used. And in particular in Philly, which I'm a little partial to understanding that model, we really are thinking about community workforce for research and how to empower communities around research and build their capacity so that their voices can be more authentically and equitably engaged in shaping the collection and the use of data and research. So with that said, I will turn it over to our first speaker, and let me just introduce both of them. It'll be Just Communities in Tucson, talking about their community survey about perspectives on public safety. There will be Carolyn Issacs, the CEO, and Rahul Jayaraman, the Policy and Research Manager. Once they're done, they're going to turn it over to the Drexel Urban Health Collaborative, who's going to talk about our West Philly Promise Neighborhood Community Survey. And we'll hear from Erikka Gilliam, who you know, our data manager, and Christina Brown, our community data lead. And in the audience, we have also Hayden Terrell and Rita Nelson, our other esteemed data leads, who will be fielding some of the questions as well when we get to our discussion section. And I also just want to put in a plug that we will be having a camp session immediately afterwards on community engagement and research, where we can talk more informally, and all of those questions that you may not have a chance to answer, to ask, we will be able to discuss more informally during that camp session. So with that, I'll turn it over to Carolyn.
All right. Good morning. All right, here we go. Green button. Blow. Good morning. My name is Caroline Issacs. I am the Executive Director of Just Communities Arizona. And our mission is to create, build, and foster new models for safety outside the criminal punishment system. So after working literally for decades on criminal justice reform, we were consistently hampered by the fact that there is literally no concept or vision for what we as a society could do about social problems beyond criminalizing them and punishing them. Therefore, any efforts to substantially reduce incarceration and dismantle the system are met not just with skepticism, but with fear and distrust. So we realized that the most important work for us to do is to demonstrate viable ways to create safety for communities. And we actually started referring to this as the what instead. One of our core values at JCA is centering the leadership of directly impacted people. We believe that all people have inherent dignity, and and those directly impacted by the system are central to the ability to actually reform properly that system. As Glenn Martin once famously said, the founder of Just Leadership USA, those closest to the problem are closest to the solution, but furthest from the resources. Related to this is our core belief that communities know best how to create safety for themselves. The term evidence-based has become ubiquitous in the field of criminal justice reform, as in many others. And while it is critically important that policies be based on sound research and practice, the reality is that the evidence that these efforts look to is almost exclusively generated outside the communities where the policies are implemented and effects most acutely felt. Excuse me, it tends to come from academic institutions or systems actors, which are working with a set of assumptions, experiences, or other cultural influences that are not necessarily shared by impacted communities living with the issues day to day. Such research is all but guaranteed to have gaps, blind spots, and implicit bias. So our work in this area was initiated by Dr. Grace Gomez, who wrote, "Community action research begins with the recognition that community members best know and understand their community's strengths, needs, and desires." So in 2019, Dr. Gomez led a team of researchers from a local community, one neighborhood in central Tucson called Flowers and Bullets, to conduct the Barrio Centro Community Safety Participatory Research Project, which surveyed 179 residents in this one community of Barrio Centro, a majority Latinx, under-resourced, over-policed community in Tucson. And the survey asked neighborhood residents about their perceptions of what safety feels like, what resources are present in healthy and thriving communities, and what safety looks like. When public figures talk about increasing community safety, it is often from the narrow perspective of policing, criminalization, with an equally narrow emphasis on punishment, surveillance, and incarceration as the solutions. But when we ask people in community what they mean by safety, the answers are very different. They refer to things that exist entirely outside the criminal justice system. Conditions that bring people together, build relationships and trust, attend to the needs of families and communities, and support both physical and emotional health. This quote from one of the respondents is a perfect summation of that very nuanced, holistic understanding of safety reflected by community members. So in 2021, we were fortunate enough to receive a Catalyst grant, through Urban Institute and Microsoft, to build on this research with a quantitative survey project. And the goal of that research was to use data to tackle racial injustice and inequity for communities of color and drive progress toward a more equitable criminal justice system by organizing affected communities in Tucson to generate their own evidence of what constitutes safety in neighborhoods. The specific goal is to produce compelling evidence, to convince the Tucson mayor and city council to move funding from the punishment system into community-level programs and services by properly centering the expertise of affected communities to inform and shape city policies. So now I'm going to hand it over to Rahul to talk more about how we designed this research and what the results have shown.
Hey everyone, my name is Rahul Jayaraman, and I'm just going to be talking a little bit about the methodology, the process by which we created the survey, and the results. So our initial task was to craft a short survey in both English and Spanish, of course, to better understand people's assessment of the quality of life in their neighborhoods, how it's changed over time, community relationships with law enforcement, and what resources they would like to see in their communities. Now, in this way, real people in Tucson could illustrate a dramatically different roadmap, potentially a dramatically different roadmap, for how their city's government invested in real public safety for low-income communities of color. Now, this survey, the Reimagining Community Safety Survey, RCS for short, expanded on the three open-ended questions in the Barrio Central report. 1, what does safety feel like? 2, what resources are in healthy, thriving communities? And 3, what does safety look like? The RCS survey was made available in November 2021 online, with collection running through August 2022. Now, this is the QR code link that we shared with participants in English. This is the QR code link that we shared with participants in English and in Spanish. So our next task, having written the survey, was to employ, on a contract basis, leaders from all 6 wards of Tucson to serve as community co-researchers or community leads, engaging in outreach to their own communities to solicit responses to the survey. But first, before they did that, they gave us feedback on the survey itself, adapted it, how it would better meet the needs of their constituents, etc. Now, to aid in survey collection, we hired these leaders who live throughout Tucson, people who were already working in the community on areas such as equity, immigration, addressing poverty and housing scarcity, community networking, and more. 8 people were hired to review the survey, provide feedback and adjustments, and then reach out to their networks and neighborhoods to complete the survey. These co-researchers aided in ensuring that survey collection was not siloed to areas that are most often surveyed, such as people with internet access, people who speak English, people who are engaged in local politics. And this is another one of our co-researchers. Now, as Caroline mentioned, through the Catalyst grant with Urban Institute and Microsoft, we were able to use Microsoft's Power BI software to create a publicly accessible dashboard that provides a visualization of all of the collected data, which is searchable through various filters, race, ward, income, etc. You can see the home screen of that dashboard here, which is on our site, featuring the categories by which data was sorted. And you can also see the total number of responses collected in the bottom right corner, just over 1,200. Now, from here, let's say we click into that first category of responses, survey demographics. This is what that page looks like. While there was a moderate overrepresentation of individuals with higher education, The proportion of a particular education level in our survey and in the census data of Tucson never exceeded a difference of 10%. On income level, however, our survey responses are much more representative of the census data for Tucson, with the difference for a particular income level never exceeding more than 5%. And similarly, the race and ethnicity section also conformed quite closely to census data, with no group not represented in our survey ever straying more than 7% from their actual representation in the population. Now, I want to show you a visualization on some of the filter slices that we can apply to the dashboard, but if anybody wants me to come back to this slide later so you can look at the data more closely, it's also on our website, and I'm happy to come back. So, this is the policing and incarceration tab of that same survey, and we can apply a filter specifically looking for Latinx, Chicano or Chicana, and Mexican American individuals. And you can see some of the results. It's a little bit cut off, but you can see some of the results in the bottom half right here. And so, for example, not just on this tab, you can apply these filters, but on all tabs. And of course, as you can see, you can apply gender, highest level of education, income range, geographic ward, and age. So these are some of those results. But to get to the actual results, oh, I'm sorry, this is one more breakdown. This is a similar breakdown of the same thing, just an illustration of how you can apply filters on top of each other within the survey breakdown category of the dashboard. So, as you can see. But to get to the results, so the first one that we want to highlight is what resources would you like to see more of in the community? And the top three that popped up there were housing, better mental health, better and more affordable mental health resources, and more funding for schools, better resourced schools. The next one is what should the city prioritize to reduce racial and socioeconomic disparities? And as you can see, it's primarily community-based alternatives to arrest and in detention, more accessible mental health and substance abuse services, and more affordable housing, with better schools being a pretty close fourth. And then one more, how has Tucson changed according to the perception of its residents within the last 2 years? And unfortunately, other than access to public transportation, and particularly in housing, we've either stagnated or gotten worse. I mean, obviously there was a pandemic in the last few years that affects things, it changes the infrastructure, but at least according to the perception of residents, there's a lot of work to be done in Tucson as a whole. And so, thank you for your time. And I'm sure they'll publicize that link, but that's just a link to the dashboard in case anybody wants to go play with the data themselves. I know we have a bunch of data nerds here, so.
Much shorter. I almost feel like I need a step stool. All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about our work at the West Philly Promise neighborhood. So the West Philly Promise neighborhood is a Department of Education funded grant, $30 million grants over up to 6 years now because we had a no-cost extension. That's ending June of 2023. And the goal of this grant is to support a cradle-to-career opportunity for children who live in or go to school in a specific area in West Philly, shown here. And the goal is to improve the education, health, and economic success of children, their families, and the communities. So another requirement for this grant, it requires us to do some data collection and integration at multiple levels, at individual, school, and neighborhood level. And so just to give you a little bit of context about the neighborhood, is the West Philly Promise neighborhood has had a long history of widespread development, gentrification, and community displacement. And there's just been a long history of mistrust of the different academic, health, and government institutions, one of which is Drexel. Drexel and University of Penn is located in the, oh, I actually didn't show you that. So Penn and Penn and Drexel are down here in the Promise neighborhood. So there is lots of high research burden in this area because of those institutions. And a lot of the residents don't feel like they ever get any results from that research, let alone any kind of benefit or improvements in the neighborhood in response to that research. And so there's also been concerns about the stewardship of funding. And so for our grant, we've allotted 25% of our funding goes towards research. And so one of the things that we want to do, we want to acknowledge and honor those experiences of the community's concerns, and understand that there have been some past harms and current pressures that these communities are going through. And so we need to acknowledge that as we're working with them. And so we want to provide our communities with substantive, frequent, and meaningful opportunities to provide input. And we want to incorporate that input in our research questions, in the methodology, and in our measures. And we want to make sure that we are transparent in what we're doing. And so whenever we create any kind of products or conduct any kind of research, we make sure that we're getting prior approval and review by community partners before anything is released. And so we also believe that the data belongs to the community. It's not our data, this is their data. And so we have an obligation to make that data accessible in multiple formats, whether it be for planning programs or evaluation or even advocacy in the community. And so we've created lots of different products for the community. This is just an example of some community snapshots that we've developed in partnership with our community leaders. And we've also created data dashboards, one of which is a COVID-19 vulnerability dashboard, which we also have links for on our website that we can put in the YAP. So I want to talk to you about the neighborhood survey. So as one of our requirements for the grant is to conduct a neighborhood survey, which it's a longitudinal cohort design that has gone on for 3 waves. So it started in 2018, and our most recent wave was ended in February of 2021. We target households with children ages 0 to 18. And we cover a variety of topics. So imagine if you finally have that household with children and you have an audience. We want to make sure we cover a lot of important topics. So those topics are health, housing, safety, education, neighborhood built environment. And then those surveys, we wanted those surveys to be, we wanted our research to be community centered. So we hired 20 community members to be the surveyors. So here, I just wanted to show a little data. So one of the things, we had three waves of the survey, and what we were really excited about is that our response rate was pretty high for all 3 waves, and we attribute that primarily because we gained that trust in the community, by using community residents as those surveyors, that even in the middle of the pandemic, which was in wave 3, we still were able to maintain the same response rate. And so, and then lastly, I just want to show one data point. So we did, our last wave had 426 caregivers. They were primarily non-Latinx mothers and grandmothers. And we thought about what data we would love to show today. And one of the points that we were really excited about was, during the pandemic, there were a lot of resources that we could show where it went down as far as in the pandemic, that a lot of these different So there were a lot of different struggles in COVID that we thought that during those times we would have more people struggling more. And so what we were excited to see was that when we asked the question to caregivers, do they have trouble affording food, we saw that even in the midst of the pandemic, although food insecurity, the rate is really high, it still didn't get higher in wave 3. And so we were really excited to see that. And we see that because during the pandemic, we partnered with all of our community partners to provide food in the community so that it actually was a protective net, a safety net in wave 3. So now I'm gonna turn over to my colleague Christina to talk to you about some of our community-led data dissemination.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Just you can talk in the mic, more helpful for the webcast folks.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Once again, I'm Christina, and I'm here to talk about how community-led data dissemination came about, and our goals, and what took place for us to become community data leads. All right, our goals was to build a community-based research team by providing us with the tools and the skills to effectively engage community residents and other stakeholders. Then we went out and engaged the community residents directly through sharing relevant, meaningful data in an accessible and understandable way. Then after that, we promoted the benefits and the importance of community research positions within Drexel and other institutions to further expand their use with data. And then we had our data lead training and our skills. This is what we did. These are our skills and our training that we had. We were identifying data sources, understanding how to read survey code books, and creating various data visualizations by utilizing technology to create new data products, such as using Canva for our data stories. And we also learned data analysts to identify priority points for survey snapshots by presenting data to various audiences, such as our neighbors, our policymakers, our academics, and et cetera, with participation in group facilitation and community-based participatory research methods and courses by Dr. Amy. And also that our next step was sharing our data and our model. By that, we did a creation of data stories that Erikka showed earlier, and engaging one-on-one with community members at schools and local events by attending 15 community events this year, 6 school-sponsored events. That's all the schools that's in our Promise neighborhood, 9 community events with community members in our neighborhood, and we also presented about our model at national conferences, such as the American Public Health Association and NNIP. Yeah, thank you. This is our team. We started out as surveyors, and now 3 of us are data leads, and we're disseminating this data. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I guess our mics are on. Thank you, everyone, for your presentations and sharing with us what you did, and a little bit about how you did it. And I think that's a lot of what folks want to hear about today. I know you've all done some elements of this work, but I do want to get started with a question to whichever panelists want to go ahead and answer. But how did you get started? How does this work? What does this work look like at the different phases of it?
Well, let's see. So at GCA, we've long had a practice of doing research on various levels, different kinds of research, mostly because at least in terms of criminal justice work, there's so little information. There's very little data that's collected or disseminated on sentencing, on impacts in communities, on virtually anything. And in a state like Arizona, where you're facing sort of an uphill battle in terms of credibility with decision makers for an organization like ours, that's been really important. It's like all of a sudden, like once you produce a report, you are an expert, even if no one reads it. So that's been actually something that we've drawn from for many years. But as I mentioned in my remarks, we're making a pretty significant pivot here from like doing the big fight at the state legislature on like statewide legislation to recognizing that actually the wisdom and the solutions and the answers are on this micro level of communities. And so anytime we do something new, we're like, we should know what the hell we're talking about. And the place to start is to do research and ask those folks. And also full credit to Dr. Grace Gomez, because this really was her brainchild and her experiences. She was way overqualified to work for us, PhD. And just knowing that this is where we need to look to for the answers to, you know, virtually any problem, the people that are dealing with that problem on the day-to-day.
Great.
Yeah.
Erikka? Oh, sorry.
So when we started, when we first started in West Philly Promise neighborhood, we knew that in order to do this survey, we knew that there was going to be an uphill battle with gaining some trust in the neighborhood. I mean, we already knew that if we were going out there and we knocked on that door and said that we were from Drexel, the doors would be slammed, there would be people looking out their window telling us to go away. And so we knew that they couldn't hear from us. They needed to hear from their neighbors. And so the first thing that we realized was we needed to hire community residents to come in and to be a part of every level of our survey. So even when we first started creating our tool, we brought in, we had our community advisory council review the domains and the questions that they decided which questions should stay and which questions needed to be dropped. One of their big inputs for that was we had a bunch of adverse childhood experience questions, and they said, you know, those questions are way too triggering, and so we cut those down, and we also added positive childhood experience questions instead, so that we're not making this such focused so much on negatives, but also in incorporating positive things. And so we involve community partners at every level, and we realized that that was what was important. And I think over the course of the waves of the survey, we did gain better relationships in the community, and they started to look forward to the survey. So, I mean, and they saw the surveyors all year long, and they'd be like, Hayden, when are you guys going to be coming back? When are you doing that survey? And so they wanted to give input. And what we would do, we would send that data in the recruitment letter and say, this is what your neighbor said, do you want to contribute? And they go, oh, no, I don't believe that. And we say, oh, well, you should come take the survey. And so, you know, it was great relationship building, and I think that it was a great opportunity to use community residents as surveyors.
Christina, did you want to answer?
No, I agree with Erikka. It's like that. And I started in wave 2 of the survey. So I didn't do all the paperwork with Erikka, Hayden, and Rita. But when I got there, it still was an issue with getting people to open their doors, because they're like, who are you? And just because you see the Promise neighborhood, we got different sections. Like, we got a bougie part, we got a regular part. So bougie party don't want you in their house, or at their door. But just like you telling me you don't want me here, your opinion isn't going to matter. So, you know, it's just making people comfortable when you see people from your community come.
And fellow caregivers and
Fellow
neighbors.
caregivers, yeah. I'm a parent of one of the children in the West Philly Promise neighborhood school. That's how I started working with them, because I wanted change in my neighborhood.
Right. And I'll just add that the Promise Neighborhood funding, I've employed this model in other communities before, but this funding was robust enough to be able to build this community-engaged infrastructure and workforce in a way that we've been able to sustain, and we've been able to promote surveyors to other positions, outreach coordinator, community resource coordinator, data leads, and the like. And so, you know, if you have those opportunities where there's robust enough funding, you're going to be hiring anyway. A good way to start is to think about hiring from within the community and to think about some full-time or some career trajectory kinds of details for keeping that voice, you know, consistently within your endeavors. So Erikka talked a little bit about gaining trust. I want to give you all a chance to talk about the ways that you know, thought about power, thought about trust, and approached it in your work in Tucson.
Absolutely. So, you know, very similar situation, right? And certainly, like, I'm not going to roll up in folks' neighborhood, take my survey. That's not a good method. And so, absolutely wanting to have these sort of ambassadors, these community research leads, and finding folks that we knew through our work over the years that already have that, you know, leadership role in the place where they live. They're running their own kinds of, you know, in some cases like 100% grassroots projects. There's a guy who runs an outfit called the Barrio Restoration, which is like him riding around on his bike that has a trailer behind it of like landscaping tools and just like cleaning up corners in his neighborhood. It's amazing, David Garcia. So those folks, right, people see him all the time. He's riding, oh, there's David. He's like riding around the neighborhood, right? So those are the folks that are going to be able to, you know, get people, build that trust, talk to them about why this is important. And it's really interesting, the dynamic with Drexel. I mean, we've got a huge university in Tucson that I don't think shows its face in community in one way or another, like good, bad, or indifferent.
A lot of those too.
So I think people, you know, whereas I know that in some communities it's just like, please stop studying us for God's sake, right? We're not in a petri dish here. But for Tucson, it's like, oh, you want to what now? You want you actually care what we have to say? So it was a different kind of challenge to like convince people to actually answer these questions and why should they bother?
Yeah, this came up in camp sessions yesterday and the day before, but I think it's important to recognize throughout our work that we are the latest in a long line of people that have walked up to these communities and said, we're going to help you, only to take their data and do nothing with it. I mean, she was talking about U of A. I was recently at the U of A. It's exactly what they do. The data is siloed. It's kept private within the university. And the university has access to a lot of data, but it's not like these guys are doing. The community gets the data back. And so I just think that was part of what we were trying to do in each step of this process. And that was the community leads throughout the survey writing and distribution process. As we enter this next phase, we have to do these community collaboratives where we hear back from, I think we've talked about it, we think of ourselves as having two constituents. One of them is the city of Tucson, because we're on a grant from them, we have deliverables to give them, and that's important. But at the same time, the real project is for the people of Tucson. It's for low-income communities of color. And the report that we are drafting right now is not targeted in academic legalese. It's not written for the city of Tucson. It's written in plain text language for people. And the community collaboratives are a chance for us to hear back from them and make sure that our interpretations of what we're seeing in the survey results, it's really easy to interpret the data, but when you look at actual initiatives that go towards those problems, it's really easy to make interpretations. For us to sit here on these like high chairs and make interpretations about it. And the community collaboratives are a chance for them to tell us, no, you're wrong about this, you're right about this, this is what we've seen. As I was looking through those survey results, I think it's no coincidence that each of those things that they mentioned for like what could be used to reduce disparities, better resource schools, more accessible mental health, more affordable housing. It is no coincidence that those have been, for decades, demonstrated to actually improve quality of life in neighborhoods, right? This is not like random chance. This is people living their life and seeing benefits accrue from a certain way of living their life, and then trying to tell us that over and over, and a government not listening to them. So we are intermediaries in the middle. We're here to interpret their will, and try to get their voices heard, and try to get the government to care more about their voices directly, hopefully in the future, so we don't have to be intermediaries, so they actually just listen to low-income communities of color.
So nice to be on a panel where you agree with absolutely everything. Erikka or Christina, did you want to add more about like leveling power or building trust?
Well, I think similar, even when you talk about the different types of reports and putting out in plain language, I mean, just listening to you say that made me realize, like, we have prioritized giving the data back to the community even more, and we're an academic institution, and normally you're just writing away for all those manuscripts. And we didn't, we could have. I mean, there's a total of 355 questions in this survey. We could have written papers for days, but we prioritize making products for the community, making snapshots, working with our partners to think about, okay, what does this data mean, and what is their interpretation for why things are changing? This data isn't just solely for us. Sure, we'll eventually get around to some manuscripts, that's what we do. But what is really important is to get that data back to them and to empower them to use this data. And I think that with us doing that has definitely leveled the power, because now this is your data. What do you want to do with your data? And I think that's all I had to say about that, but yeah.
I'll just add that trust building starts before any funded project. And so, this was built on trust and working together on community boards and civic associations. Those relationships need to be nurtured before, during, and after any funded project, which is challenging in an academic institution. We don't get funded or even often kudos for that level of time spent to build that trust.
I have the same ringtone, and you scared me. Oh, no.
That's all I'm going to say.
What a cue.
So I want to hear from you both, or from both projects, about how engaging community residents in the collection, the leading of the collection of the data, how that improved the research.
Oh boy. It was really interesting, actually, because pandemic. And so the first phase of this, the first few months, we actually could not go in person. We couldn't send folks door to door to community activities. It was all online. So we continue to be concerned, right, about like some of the representationalness of the, whoa, boy, not a data person. In the data is not really what it might have been, I think, had we been in person from the jump. It's like, who takes surveys online?
Yeah.
That's who was responding at first. Even with, folks talking it up, we're like, do you have Instagram? Like all of our friends, all of our community researchers, like just trying to get in their social media accounts. That was huge. But I think in the second wave, when things opened up, and we also, as Rahul mentioned, in the second half of this, we had the city of Tucson come in and support the research to be able to get all 6 wards, the sort of political subdivisions of Tucson, to get responses. And they gave us access to, like, you can go to XYZ Community Center on the day where they have like the free pool party. And be there next to the nachos. Like, that gets you good data. So that accessibility, both with having folks from that community as your ambassadors, as the researchers, talking to folks about why they should bother, why it's important, was huge. But then also, like, where are you able to intersect with folks, what's happening in the community. And this is also Tucson in the summer. So that's a challenge that may not exist in Philly. It's like, where is the shade that I can stand in while I ask people to fill this out? Being able to give out gift cards to folks for responding. We didn't have that in the first round. And that incentive was huge. We went to the community food bank on a day when folks were coming to get food, and we're able to reach folks that we were not going to be able to find any other way. So being creative, being scrappy, and just getting out there was key.
Yeah, so as I alluded to, our survey had 355 questions. So that was an in-person survey. We had a random sample of addresses of houses that we deemed to be likely to have children. And the way that we did it in wave one, we were able to be in person, knock on doors, and start building that trust. And then it got better in wave two, and then pandemic hit. So now we can't do door to door. Luckily, we had, because it's a longitudinal survey, every year we collected contact information. But normally, if you were to call people, by pandemic, I don't know if it's just me, but you're getting so many dud calls. We were using the Google Voice, so it's some random number that's calling you, but yet because we built those relationships when we left, hey, it's Christina from West Philly Promise Neighborhood, they would actually call back, and we were still able to do the survey from our offices, even in the midst of the pandemic, and we actually had to split the survey in half because we really couldn't keep people on the phone for an hour plus to do the survey. But we still got pretty good response rates, even by cutting it in half and having them do it on half of it online. And it's because the community was invested in it. After we've already spoke to these people for, in some cases, years, and so they were invested in that, and they wanted to see their data, so they look forward to that. And so I think that was one of those things that it was great that we had the community residents, the community surveyors.
And they were troubleshooting in the field. I will also say that it was the community who suggested that we make this a longitudinal panel study. We were thinking of 3 cross-sectional samples. It's really hard to get to caregivers. It's not just a random household survey. It's a random household survey where you have to find a kid and then find their caregiver. And the community said, folks are going to want to keep you accountable. So they're going to want to talk to you all 3 times. And I think that was the key to our success during the pandemic. Were you going to chime in, Christina?
That was the key to our success. They were excited, like, well, where's our snapshot? I got my snapshot in the mail. I was wondering when you were going to give me a call, or they was leaving voicemails themselves before we even started calling, because they were excited to hear the results and the change, and they were seeing a difference in our neighborhood. So once the pandemic came, it was like, oh, what's going to happen now? And we were here. We were still there, and that's what gave them hope. Like, we're still here, and we didn't leave them. Most times, institutions come in and take our information and go, and don't say anything else back to us. And we're giving truth, like the real answers. We're not sugarcoating nothing. If it's a problem, it's a problem. And people are excited. We're excited. Yeah.
I'll just chime in too. I think we didn't show a lot of data. There are a lot of household and neighborhood needs in this community, and we don't feel like that's the lead story. It's what we share with the community so they can use it as a tool. But we've had moments where Drexel loves to tout this model of creating jobs and hearing from the community. And there was a time I was working with the media director at Drexel who wanted to paint a picture of health is worse in the West Philadelphia Promise Zone, Promise neighborhood than other areas of Philadelphia. And I said, that is not the title of the story. The story is data collected by community residents to inform community change. We do not need to be another force re-stigmatizing this community by by discussing all of its needs, because of course we know there are a lot of deficit-based data rather than asset-based data. So our snapshots and our briefs, our issue briefs, where we use our indicators as well, we balance deficit and asset-based data as much as we can given the limitations. And the story is about it being a tool, a community-led tool for improvement. Sorry, I keep chiming in. I know I'm the moderator.
Could I add something real quick?
Yes, please, Rahul.
I just want to say that, like, from the start, I think they immediately improved our research, like getting the community leads to come in and review, like Erikka was saying earlier, to review the survey before we sent it out. That makes the survey more accessible. It makes it so that people are less triggered by it, more likely to finish the whole thing and give us good data and give themselves, in the long run, good data. But I think at the same time, it's in meeting people out with these community leads and going and seeing them in person. It's part of that idea of meeting them where they are, not just physically, right, like in the physical location, but also doing the survey in Spanish, linguistically, right, in their struggles. Caroline was like touching earlier on the fact that part of the survey collection happened through the summer, and summers in Tucson are not fun. Like being outside during the summer in Tucson and Phoenix and Arizona as a whole it can get really exhausting. People have heat strokes, right, all of that stuff, but those are real problems, and these are problems that these communities deal with. And so being out there with them at that same time and experiencing it with them and just talking to them, I think meeting them where they are again was that was a real way that we strengthened I think it made them feel like they could talk to us a bit more. Being with people who they know, as well as being in their physical location, speaking to them in their language, I think it just made it reduced accessibility barriers wherever they were.
Yeah, that's how we were too, like with our appointments, in the rain, in the snow, in the sleet, in the heat wave, everything. We was not missing our appointments because we were keeping our word. And we were there.
Yeah.
They shoveled while they walked.
Keeping
we
your
got
word
out
is
and
very
did it.
important.
Yeah, we
Keeping
kept
your
our
word is a very important phrase. Yeah, showing up is very important. So I want to ask questions of all of you, including our other data leads here, about how the data has or will be used to by the community to create change. So if I don't know who wants to start, but if we could make sure that we get a microphone over here to Rita and Hayden at some point. Who wants to get started up here, though?
I think we're starting with community collaboratives, and we'll move it forward from there. But that is the first chance that the data goes back to the community, that we get a chance to hear what they say about it. We're hoping to give them the disaggregated data as well. We have access to it, and we can distribute it at the same time. But the first real outlet for it that's coming up is we want to hear back from them post this survey collection, but pre-interpretation, right? Pre-sending it out to people, pre-distribution. We want to hear from them, and we want to hear their thoughts on it. And so it's not too, I wouldn't say on like a year-long basis plan out too much farther than that, but that is our next, and that's a big outlet, and it takes a lot of logistical work going into it, but that is our big next outlet for hearing back from them and involving them in the process.
I'll just tag on to that it's, for us, we're about, social change and policy change. And so this is the organizing opportunity, right? You go in, you're like, this is what we heard. Did we get it right? The next question is, so what do you want to do about it?
Yeah.
Right? What do we do now with this information? And we're having a moment, boy, that's an understatement. But in terms of, all of a sudden there's a whole lot of federal money sloshing down into cities and towns for a lot of these kinds of issues. Our project really is about expanding the definition of safety so that we can move policy in this direction of, like, safety is actually about housing. It's about the things that people talk about here. It's like, you ask people what makes them safe. They generally don't say more cops. They talk about stuff that exists completely outside of that system, but that's where all the money is. Yeah. So for, our ulterior motive, as it were, here really is about moving people and money out of those systems back into the hands of community where it can do the most good. And having folks engaged in that effort and owning and directing that effort from the get-go is the way that you can do this well. And, we're finding too that there's, people in community have been creating safety for themselves all this time, right? All this time. It just doesn't look like that thing. So that if we can highlight what's already there and is already successful. If you are working in a community where, 90% of the men between ages 18 and 55 have been systems involved, everything you do is reentry. You don't have to call it, it's not a reentry program. That's your people, that's your reality, those are the problems that you're solving. And so part of this is narrative change, is getting leaders and the people with those resources to understand these connections and start moving. We did a lot of this, make the policy and the money will follow, and actually it's the other way around.
Yeah, absolutely.
You move the money. And this is one of the ways that we're not defunding anybody. It's just, this is what people are asking for. This is what they need, and they know. They know how to create that safety. Just get out of the way and let them do it.
I just want to chime in and say it's not even that they don't say more cops. They say the exact opposite, right? Like when you look at that city priorities to reduce racial and socioeconomic disparities, what was the first thing they listed? Community-based alternatives to arrest and detention. This is the exact opposite of cops. That is a reduction in how much police operate in your communities, right? And so the fact that Tucson's budget, when it talks about public safety, is so tied down to policing and incarceration, I think it really illustrates the detachment of that government from the needs of the citizens that it's supposed to care for, or at least certain segments of the citizens that it's supposed to care for. Catalina Foothills is very well represented in the government. Catalina Foothills is our very rich area. It's very well represented.
And there are no cops over there.
And there are no cops over there. So.
Yeah. Hayden, yeah. You have to just turn it on.
Okay, my name is Hayden Terrell. I belong to several different civic organizations, and one being the 16th District Police Action on Crime. So we use this data because our point of being in existence is to become a better bridge to the police department. Let's face it, police departments are not liked in Philadelphia. And they have the same thing, they're very abusive. So we're trying to make it so that we have a better connection to the community other than coming to their house on an emergency. So we can use this data to see, because there is a question in the survey, do you know any of the police in your area, or by name, by sight? And most people don't. So we try to build a community of police using this data. In fact, tonight we're giving a Halloween party for the kids. So we want them to see them in a different light besides just being the guy that comes and bangs on your door. And that's a good thing. So we use it like that. We use it for also areas that are high crime areas, so they know where to be and where to put the extra policing. So we use the information in the organizations.
Rita, did you want to answer?
Good morning, and I'm Rita. So when we went out, when we first started out, it was slow. And then we wore these wonderful orange shirts and jackets. Everybody kept wondering who we were. We got a few people, and they realized, oh, they're not that bad. But we've been at all the schools. We've been at all the community events. We've been in the playgrounds. You name it, we've been there. And each time we left, we said, when we get done with our surveys, we'll come back to you. They feel so confident now to see us, to know that we kept our word. And we also helped take the pressure off of Drexel. There's a lot of development going on, and everybody thought it was Drexel and Penn coming through. And then they realized it's developers. So you're not mad at Drexel anymore, not as much. You still have resentment, but when we take these snapshots out and we have conversations, they're quite interesting. And of course, you have some who are mad, and then you have to talk them down. Then you have to make them understand, and all is well at the end of the day. But this data information must be shared. You cannot hold on to it for your own good. If you say you're going to bring it, you got to take it, and we don't have a problem taking it.
You can see the benefit of community voices in these conversations. These are not conversations that any graduate student or any other Drexel staff member could have. Christina, did you want to chime in about how the data is being used?
It's being used with the after-school programs, because when we started out, most of our schools did not have after-school programs. The next year, when we came back to do surveys, most of our schools had after-school programs. They had therapists in school. It was safety put with the police sometimes outside of schools when kids coming back and forth to school. So it all came together. Like, it wasn't like everybody thought, oh, they're going to take the money and just go. No, they took your survey results and they made a change in our community. They made a change within the schools. They made a change within mental health. They made a change within the policing. It's just, it took time. It took trust. Like, we had to build trust. And once we came back and kept coming back, first we started with only 5 schools, then we had it in all 7 schools. Then we had it, like, it was just step by step, and it's just growing. And now all of our schools have after-school programs. And all of our schools, after school, when you come home from school, most times it is a police officer outside to make sure the kids aren't fighting or getting into stuff. Even adults, they out there fighting too. But, you know, it's just making sure it's a safety net, and it's there. And when we came back the next time, we're like, oh, you said your school didn't have a therapist, but now look, y'all do. Whoa, you said your playground was filthy. Our playground's a mess. Now the playgrounds are clean. Now we have public safety right around. We didn't have some street lights and different things. Now we do have it. And every time we came back with something new. And the community excited. We're excited.
I should mention that the primary goal of these data is to plan for and evaluate Promise Neighborhood initiatives. So you can see, from Christina's voice how that happened. But there are so many questions. We have this sample that answers questions about their kids, so we have information about many more kids than caregivers, and we have information about the kids, the household, the caregivers, the neighborhood. So the primary goal is to inform the Promise Neighborhood initiatives, but also that all of these data could be used for all these other purposes. So I think with that, we're probably ready for audience Q&A. And I think you can direct your question to the panel and also to Rita and Hayden if you choose.
Hey, good morning, everyone. I have a lot of questions, but I'm trying to really get a rich question out there to get everything I want. So I'm trying to combine a lot of it and trying to prioritize things. But I think the first question would be, what were some lessons that you can tell us you learned along the way that were just oh man, I should have done that, or let's go back to this, right? That's the first question. But also I think being part of NIP, there's the power of that is being able to expand your reach with other communities beyond your own. How do you see? What do you think your place is in supporting initiatives like this one that as you're talking, I'm my heart is going like this because I'm just oh, that's awesome. Yeah, that's good. And I can envision what that looks like. But how do you envision yourselves, and what would you want from other communities? How would you want them to expand something like this to their communities? Because I would love to bring this to Milwaukee, the most beautiful city in the world.
Well, I'll do this. Okay, I'm going to just answer the first one because that one I was really excited to answer. So one of the things, I think we did a great job of incorporating community voice, community input in our data and research. We did not do a good job of incorporating that in our program planning. So we did it all on the data side, but we did not incorporate our community partners in deciding which programs were going to get funded. And I think that was one of our things that if we could do it all over again, we would do that.
Yeah, they were not linked together from the very beginning. Yeah. The data drove it, but there weren't community prioritization methods included. We did not run that part of it, but it was informed. It was community informed, but not co-planned. Just to the where do we see us now, because this is what I stay up at night thinking about how to sustain this amazing team. I think we're trying to establish ourselves as experts in a model for community engaged place-based initiative evaluation. Excuse me. So we're involved in a lot of them. Our Promise Zone, our Burn Criminal Justice Award through the Department of Justice, a place-based Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, place-based co-located programs that we're advising on how to create community engaged infrastructure for evaluating that, and some other applications that are in to sort of extend this kind of model to other neighborhoods in Philadelphia. So I would love to have a community-centered workforce in every neighborhood of need in Philadelphia, and we're trying to get there. We'll see. It's very time-intensive and expensive, so it takes a lot of grant dollars to do that, but that's where I'm hoping that we can all go together.
Yeah. I feel as if one thing that we could do better. Thank you. I feel as if one thing we could have did better was from the very beginning, get more community members involved in the actual building of the survey. Because once we, as surveyors, got hold of the survey, we found that there were some questions that needed to be altered. Some needed to be deleted. Some needed to be totally taken out. So that was something that I feel as if we should have been involved probably from the very beginning. Plus, I would like to know, after all this data has been collected, who actually gets to claim it? Does the community have any possession of it, or does the school hold all the possession of it?
So as I've been listening to their presentation for Drexel, I've just been really amazed by the idea, like how involved the community members became as data leads within the process, right? Like we are using community voice within each segment of this, but the idea that you train them with you and they evolve with you and become part of this process and capable of presenting at these conferences and taking the lead, all this stuff, I think there's a lot of power to that because I didn't grow up in these communities, right? Like I have to acknowledge that, right? That I'm sitting here and I'm reading about them and I'm trying to learn about them from community members, but I think there's so much power in just having those members be involved in the process to the extent that they can come up here and just talk directly to you and be like, I've lived here, now I've been part of this project, and now we're working to make a change here, right? And this is the avenue by which we can do so, and this is the closest we felt to a real avenue, right? I think that is really powerful, and I've been listening, and I just, that could have been something we could have adapted in, I think, to our program a bit more.
And I'll just say, I had an epiphany recently. I've been doing this for almost 30 years now. And I think it takes a while before community residents truly feel the power leveling, where they can contribute their voices to a research discussion, and that their perspectives on research and how it could best be conducted is just as valuable, if not more valuable, than the researchers in the room because of their community expertise and things that researchers cannot learn. So it does take a while, and I think you see the confidence and the capacity that these women have and just improve every aspect of the work.
I'll throw in one more on the what we would have maybe done different or lessons learned. We were so excited and flattered that we got buy-in from the city of Tucson. Right, like, ooh, wow, we're legit. And really did not anticipate that extra politicizes things that are already political, especially when you're asking questions about your interactions with the police in 2021 and 22. So, we're like, hey, city council members, please share this with your constituents, right? And who shares it with, like Steve Kozaczyk from Ward 6 pumped it out in his newsletter, and we got a whole lot of really angry white men responding to our survey. Like, whoops. So really thinking through what that's really going to look like and how helpful that help is actually going to be from elected officials in terms of how representative your data is.
And there was a part too. I'm really interested in like how do you see yourself connecting or and expanding this supporting others, NMP partners in this?
I'll jump in on that one. So this always was something we hope to replicate in other Tucson communities, but I think it can also be applied elsewhere. So the survey is the survey. It's an instrument. It's right there. It's adaptable to the folks that are going to consult from the place where you might be doing that. And I think the BI software from Microsoft that was part of this grant is also like huge. That takes a lot of training that we got through the grant. It's like how to actually plug your numbers into that thing. But that's stuff that I think can be translated to a lot of different places, and we hope to do that in other communities in Arizona. But would love to talk to folks about where else it could go.
We are happy to share our model. Our community workforce development around research is really based on a lot of trainings that we have, including data and democracy and these other trainings that I've developed over the years. So we'd be thrilled to share. We'd be thrilled to to go after grants where we could replicate. We have all kinds of supervisory models, field protocols. We've documented everything because we replicated each wave in other studies as well. So it's a transportable model.
Yeah, as a data person, I just want to back up how cool the dashboard is and how important the dashboard is. Like, it's having that evolve also with the survey, and having, like, as new survey responses come in, this dashboard is being updated. It means that we can provide the link to people who we want to take the survey, and we can show them what their data is being used for, right? We can give them a link, you can let them play with it, right? It's really intuitive, it's very well, like the tabs are all pretty easy to interpret, right? I just think that was huge, and I think that replicating that tool does so much for data accessibility, does so much for just letting people see how, it's aggregated, so it's important to also distribute the disaggregated data so that you can use it for your own purposes, right? And you can adapt it however you want. But having an intuitive tool that summarizes experience, lived experience in Tucson is such an important and powerful tool for showing communities what you're contributing to, what your response is building, is this groupthink. So yeah, I just think that dashboard is really cool.
My question is about involving the community members still within the umbrella of the university. So I before the Children's Trust, I was at the University of Miami. I was part of longitudinal research through the National Institute of Drug Abuse, a 20-year study, and the only way that happened was because we hired people from the community that we were following, and they built trust, and they had those relations that you'd make appointments and people would be there. They had those connections, and I think within our study participants, we had credibility, right? The staff that we hired from the community had that credibility, had those trusting relationships, but they were still employees. And my role at the Children's Trust, where I'm in a broader role in the community across Miami-Dade County, I hear a lot from the local grassroots community-based organizations that, oh yeah, universities come in and they want to hire our people, right? And then they sort of still don't, they're still the university. Like I still would say, but we had people from, who had these connections, and they were, known in the neighborhood, and they could find people and have the, but we still kind of, from some perceptions in the community, didn't have that total credibility, didn't have that we were of and from the community. And I know broader across the university, there are a lot of places that were not, right, yeah, part of that philosophy. I don't know if you feel like an island sometimes at your university, but I'm wondering about alternative models. So hiring community-based through community-based organizations, maybe subcontracting staff that would still be part of grassroots groups that have more credibility than having the email at Drexel
Yeah.
Whatever.
That's the
edu.
ideal model. That's what I do in most of my studies, subawards, very large subawards, if not most of the funding funneled through, whoever they might be the lead agency, Drexel might be the lead agency, but they're getting the majority of the funds for their workforce. And I might be providing supervisory or training supports. That's ideal. In this case, there wasn't an agency, and we have very close relationships with community development corporations and multi-service community-based organizations in these neighborhoods. And one that had a youth-led kind of community health worker or community outreach worker model, they didn't feel they had the capacity to absorb this. So it was intentional. It was actually co-decided that this workforce would sit at Drexel. But now that it does, I'm using it to try to change Drexel's culture toward how Drexel is hiring researchers for its many, many, many multi-millions of dollars of studies that it has. So we're looking to create a community researcher academy at Drexel. We have support. Our president has said he wants to be Drexel to be the most civically engaged university in the country. So we use that all the time to try to push for, well, you said you want to do this, and we know the mistrust around research. So, and the PI of our grant is actually a senior vice provost in charge of the Office of University and Community Partnerships for the university. So with her support and with our Office of Research, we're hoping to create a community researcher academy that can create the capacity building infrastructure as well as bridge funding, and then for us to do a lot of in-reach to Drexel researchers. We're also working with the IRB to do more ethical review and all of that. So we're doing some internal work, and I think it's been an opportunity to have these folks be a part of the Drexel community while still being leaders in their own community. But I agree. I believe the subcontracting and helping to build the capacity of community-based organizations to have that workforce there is ideal. But sometimes they don't. Sometimes they want, they want the programs and not the research infrastructure. But I totally agree with you.
Hi, this is Nikolai from Atlanta. I have a question for both and one specifically for Tucson. Now, the first one is, have you seen, for both, have you seen any shift or clear example of how residents that are not traditionally activists in their community are using or have changed after this data collection process? Mm-hmm. Because I think there's, for example, it's common in some neighborhood engagement organizations that there's sometimes a problem of representation or real representation, and that I want to know if there's after the effort of reaching out to the people, there has been some change or use to actually find that data useful by other groups that are actually not usually represented. And the second one is, I understand that you did your work, your project, in the 6 wards of this. Okay. Was there, I assume that there are wards that have different demographic characteristics and income characteristics. Was there some different strategy that you had to implement to ensure the participation was similar? Because from other experiences that I've had, it has to be basically completely different projects based on what population are you addressing the things to. I think one advantage that the team from Philadelphia has is that it was such a localized project that you have one strategy, but in your case, that diversity, I think it's interesting to see if there was some thing that you used to address that.
You want to start with the first one? I think you want to take that. No, I want to hear from the data leads. Yeah. You guys are so connected with leadership in the community. I'm just curious if you know, if I'm understanding your question correctly, if folks who aren't naturally leaders or hadn't been involved in quite that way were either motivated by these data or this process or this initiative.
Oh, I guess I was motivated because I was not into no politics or nothing. Just going to work, do what I gotta do. It's just every time I pick my son up from school, it was always something. It's always something, and it was always something in my neighborhood. So when I found out about the Promised Neighborhood, I'm like, wow, I gotta be a part of this. Like, can I please, like, I just want to hear everybody else's opinion. Like, I want to hear my other community members, like, how they are feeling and stuff. Because just because I feel one way doesn't mean that everybody else was feeling the same way. And that was the difference, because I was thinking like, well, they gotta not like this either. But some people were comfortable with certain things. It was just kind of different. And now we have a Power Academy that's helping us with a voice, so we can have the skills that we need to make changes by ourselves once the promised neighborhood leaves. Like, by using our data snapshots and everything, and like, it's for everybody in our community, the Power Academy. So it's not leaving nobody out. Everybody is welcome. It's just like a couple of different classes that you got to take. And 100 people can't go at one time, but it's more than one session. And it's helping advocate. Like, we're starting a Power Academy, so once they leave, everybody can advocate for themselves. We're giving them the tools.
I'm going to piggyback off of you, Christina. We do have what we call the West Philly Community Power Academy. We teach people or give people the tools, because we found out through the survey that we didn't reach everybody, and there were a lot of issues still that needed to be addressed. So we came up with the West Philly Community Power Academy, supported by the Promised Neighborhood, and we are still Drexel employees, but we are community members. So we teach and give people the tools that they need to advocate for themselves. And we do it with organizations, churches, family members. We hold a 6 weeks class, and we give them everything they need to know that would help them get their issue out to the people or out to the particular person that they want to get it to. And we even hold a graduation for them at the end, and we have them do one of their projects while they're in this 6-week study. So if they need assistance, we're right there. We have the information, we have the data, we have the resources.
Yeah, because our survey is only for caregivers and not everybody, so everybody didn't have a voice. That's how the Power Academy came about.
Rita, can you just briefly describe the PZRC?
Okay, so the PZRC, excuse me, it's Promise Zone Research Connection. I didn't hear about it until 2018. What the purpose of this organization is to stop these researchers from just coming in and doing what they want to do, collect information and be gone. They'll offer a gift card. Don't just take the information from the people that they question and leave. So what we're doing now is we're making sure that from the PZRC was created CRIB. So that's Community Research
Review Board.
Thank you. So what we're doing is now the different institutions and all realize, West Philly ain't playing with us. West Philly is tightening up. So they're giving information they're coming to Drexel with their proposal, what they want to
Not Drexel, it's a community group.
Yeah.
They just happen to use a Drexel space for their meetings. It's not Drexel.
Okay, so it's not Drexel. So they're coming to the community
Rita's the
groups, and they're giving their proposal what they want to do research in the community for. We now are having them come before us, and we need to know before they get started, because some of them already have their plan in place, already put people in the street. We need to know what you want to do with the community, and how can we be involved. That way, we're monitoring the information that you're collecting. We're out there with you as you're collecting this information. And surprisingly enough, they're participating. So, and to piggyback off of what I think the question was, after a building was bought and it became a community-based building. So you have computer training, you have a wellness fair, you have a music room where they can record. They have dance classes. They have all sorts of activities for the children. So the community now is seeing that the university, Drexel University, is really trying to be in partnership with the community, and it's they have much better progress. They bought a building that they were set to tear down and make an apartment building. They bought that. They're now renovating it so that we can participate as community members. We as PCRC is going to have an office in that building. So I'll give credit to the university for at least coming and staying in the community and making the community members aware. All the civic associations are connected. They all know, they all can talk to the people that are doing site with their issues. And it's just great that the community, the institutions, only Drexel, Penn hasn't gotten on board yet. Penn will be next. But the fact that you want to come into our community and you want to talk to us and you want to hear us, because we've not been heard for years. The main reason why people were upset with Drexel is because Drexel came in 50 years ago easy and just taught them into selling their homes, and people were left without a home. So that left mistrust. So you come and say you're from Drexel, you're not going to get a response. But they learn from that. The good thing is they learn from that. And also now people realize it's not Drexel, it's developers that are coming through. So I will give credit to Drexel, even though it's not Drexel. But I'm going to give credit to Drexel for at least coming into the community and working with the community.
Thanks, Rita. And I think there was the question specifically for you guys. I know we're running out of time.
Yeah, so it's a great question. I'll say, like, I think we were like kind of naive about that reality of the differences just even by those words. I mean, we knew, right, all of those demographics. I think we leaned really heavily on the community researchers to make up that gap for us, and probably unfairly, right? And so there was, the great thing, again, about the BI is that then we're in real time going like, oh, we're really like, here's a gap that we can see, like, how are we gonna make up for that? And so some of this last minute push that I talked about was really about like, responses in Spanish, super low. Like, that's a problem, right? So what are we gonna do about that? Okay, get hooked up, go to the community food bank, try to talk with the researchers about like, how do we overcome this? And it's a process. We're definitely learning a lot of lessons this way. And I think given it to do again, we'd have a lot more, I think, savvy about how that rolls out. I think we're like, oh, we'll just, our researchers will go and it'll be great.
Like as we sit here, and as I analyze the stuff from the survey, the biggest representation problem we have is ward distribution. Some wards are relatively open because wards are set up to be similar in population, right? So there should be, ideally, in an ideal survey, no real substantive difference between the amount of responses you get from each ward in like a properly collected one. But we have overrepresentation in some and we have underrepresentation in others. It's going to require some bootstrapping before we go into actual, like what the city's asking for is basically a few multivariate regression analyses. Before we can do any of that, we have to bootstrap the data so that it's actually representative of Tucson as a whole. So yeah, I would absolutely agree. There was some naivete that went into just leaning on the people, like, because we assume that, oh, they're closer to the ground, they can inform us better than we could even know, right? But there has to be some legwork that has to be done on your end to adapt a strategy, you're right, and to adapt a strategy for each of these communities. And if we had a do-over, that would be definitely something we could adapt in better.
I think we have time for
Last
one more.
question.
Yeah.
I promised Leah that I would keep it quick. So I have questions for Christina and the other data leads. So I know that, first off, I really appreciate y'all being here. But I know that there's a lot of times like people think of themselves as like not a math person or like not a data person. Although it sounds like, Miss Rita, it sounds like you're a data person now, if you weren't already. So I'm just curious about like if you didn't already think of yourself that way, or like if there were already barriers for getting, like, kind of approaching that sort of work. What sorts of things, like, what was hard coming into that? What sorts of things made it easier? Like, how you might want to be doing that sort of work again? I guess kind of like where you're at now in that, now that you're officially data people.
It was super hard for me because I'm not a mathematician. And when I hear the word data, I get paranoid. I don't like numbers. That's all I can hear is numbers. But, I had a great coach, Erikka, who helped us like distinguish the difference in data. Just because we see the numbers is not going to add up to the percentages. So I learned that the percentages is what matters, not the numbers, because we could have surveyed 16 people, but it could have been like a 35%. It could have made it higher, but surveyed 100 of these people, but it could have made the number lower. So now I know, pay attention to the percentage and not the numbers. You want to speak on that?
Like Christina said, it was hard for me. Now, the reason why it was hard for me, I'm a retired postal worker. I didn't have nothing to do with no numbers. My concern was getting mail out. So, but Erikka, when we met her in 2017, came to us as a data person. And when I say she know her stuff, she know her stuff. So she in turn took students from Amy's class and they became a team. And they broke it down to a step by step. So now we just finished up a data story. Now that is so interesting. But I'm going to tell you, once this is all said and done, I won't need my data lead service for nothing.
I'm not a data person either. I don't know too many people that are, but I think the training that we received was invaluable. Drexel gave us really great in-depth training, including Erikka, and we had so many trial runs of getting things done that, you know, how many times it takes to make one snapshot. So all the information and time that goes into it. Personally, I would not give up the position. I enjoy it. I've gained knowledge. I've gained a lot of confidence with data, because before I would just shy away from it. But I've learned how to disseminate it, how to look at it, and how to see it in different perspectives. So using it out into the community is a great thing, and I don't think I would change being a data lead.
And Hayden has learned how, we've done a qualitative coding project together as well.
God.
So these ladies have also facilitated focus groups and qualitative interviewing on other projects as well. So their skill set is growing. So I think we're over on time. Was there someone else who wanted to chime in that okay. I think we're just a little over time, and I think we're headed into a break, but I want to thank our panelists and our contributing data leads. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Microsoft, for all of this.